Good evening. I'm back at my old house, and there's a stream line. My sister is showering, so you will be hearing that dripping throughout the reading. We will be starting with the rose and the weed. In a country garden, a lovely rose looked down upon a common weed and said, "You are an unwelcome guest, economically useless and unsightful of appearance. The devil must love weeds. He made so many of them." The unwelcome guest looked up at the rose and said, "Lilies and fester smell far worse than weeds, and, one supposes, that goes for roses." "My name is Dorothy Perkins," the rose said haughtily. "What are you, a beetleweed, a bladderweed, a beggarweed?" The names of weeds are ugly, and Dorothy shuddered slightly, but lost none of her pretty petals. "We have some names, prettier than Perkins, or, for my taste, Dorothy, among them silverweed, and jewelweed, and candyweed." The weed straightened a bit and held his ground. "Anywhere you can grow, I can grow better," he said. "I think you must be a burglar weed," said the disdainful Miss Perkins, "for you get in where you aren't wanted, and take what isn't yours, the rain and the sunlight and the good earth." The weed smiled a weedy smile. "At least," he said, "I do not come from a family of climbers." The rose drew herself up to her full height. "I'd have you know that roses are the emblem of old England," she said. "We're the flower of song and story." "And of war," the weed replied. "The summer winds take you by storm, not you the winds with beauty. I've seen it happen many times to roses of yesteryear, long gone and long forgotten." "We are mentioned in Shakespeare," said the rose. "Many times and in many ways. The lines are too sweet for your ears, but I will tell you some." Just then, and before Miss Perkins could recite, a wind came out of the west, riding low to the ground and swift, like the cavalry of March, and Dorothy Perkins' beautiful disdain suddenly became a scattering of petals, economically useless and of appearance not especially slightly. The weed stood firm, his head to the wind, armored, or so he thought, in security and strength. But as he was brushing a few rose petals and aphids from his lapels, the hand of the gardener flashed out of the air and pulled him out of the ground by the roots before you could say Dorothy Perkins, or, for that matter, jewelweed. Moral: tout, as the French say, in a philosophy older than ours and an idiom often more sufficient, passe. The bat who got the hell out. A colony of bats, living in a great American cave, had got along fine with 1,000 generations flying, hanging head down, eating insects and raising young. And then one year, a male named Flitter, who had fluttered secretly out of his room that night and flown among the haunts of men, told his father that he had decided to get the hell out. The shocked father sent Flitter and Fleeter, the great-great-grandfather of all the bats in the cave. "You should be proud of being a bat among bats," said old Fleeter, "for we are one of the oldest species on the planet, much older than man, and only mammal capable of true flight." The discontented young bat was not impressed. "I want to live like a man among men," he said. "Men of the best food, and the most fun, and the cutest females." At this, old Fleeter stormed about the cave, squeaking unintelligibly. Then he He recovered his calm and continued his talk. A man got into my room one night, he said, and managed somehow to tangle me in his hair. It was a shattering experience from which I shall never completely recover. When men die, they go to heaven, but when bats are dead, they are dead, said Flitter. I want to go to heaven when I die. This amused old Flitter in a gaunt and gloomy sort of way, and he chittered, quickered, and zickered for some moments before he could say, You have no more soul than a moose, or a mouse, or a mole. You should be glad that you will never become an angel, for angels do not have true flight. One wants to sleep through eternity, not bumble and flap about forever like a bee or butterfly. But Flitter had made up his mind, and the old bat's words of wisdom were in vain. That night, he discontented young bat quit the bat colony and flickered out of the cave in the confident hope of giving up his membership in the Chiroptera and joining the happy breed of men. Unfortunately, for his dream, he spent his first night hanging head down from the rafters of an auditorium in which a best-selling inspirationalist was dragging God down to the people's level. Ushers moved slightly among the rapt listeners, selling copies of the speaker's books. Shake his hands with the Almighty. You can be Jehovah's pal. Have you taken out eternity insurance? The speaker was saying, Have you a little talk with the Lord while you are waiting on a bus, or riding to work, or sitting in the dentist's chair? Have comfy chats with the Lord in the little cozy corners of spare time. Flitters decided that there was something the matter with the acoustics, or with his tragus, caused by hanging head down in the presence of an eternal species. But when he began flying about the auditorium, there was no change in the nature of the English sentences. Tell the Lord to put it in there, the inspired man went on. Give him your duke. The speaker waved clasped hands above his head and gazed up the ceiling. Keep pitching, God, he said. You've got 2 strikes on Satan. Flitter, who had never felt sick before in his life, felt sick and decided to get the air. After he had got the air, he realized that he did not want to become a member of the species Homo sapiens because of the danger of bumbling or flapping into the inspirationalists after they had both become led angels. And so Flitter returned to the cave, and everybody was astonished to see him. Nobody said anything, and for a time there was a great silence. I've come the hell back, said Flitter meekly, and resumed without discontent the memorial life of the Chiroptera, flying, hanging head down, eating insects, and raising young. Moral. By decent minds, he is aboard who'd made a babbit of the Lord. Sometimes I don't understand these morals, but it is okay. This will be the last one for the night. The Lion and the Foxes. The lion had just explained to the cow, the goat, and the sheep that the stag they had killed belonged to him, when 3 little foxes appeared on the scene. We'll do one more after this one. I will take 1/3 of the stag as a penalty, said one, for you have no hunter's license. I will take 1/3 of the stag for your widow, said another, for that is the law. I have no widow, said the lion. Let us not split hairs, said the 3rd fox, and he took his share of the stag as a withholding tax. Against a year of famine, he explained. But I am king of beasts, roared the lion. Ah, then you will not need the antlers, for you have a crown, said the foxes, and they took the antlers too. Moral. It is not easy to get the lion's share nowadays as it used to be. That is true. The wolf who went places. A wealthy young wolf, who was oblivious of everything except himself, was tossed out of college for cutting classes in corners. And he decided to see if he could travel around the world in 80 minutes. That isn't possible, his grandmother told him, but he only grinned at her. The impossible is the most fun, he said. She went with him to the door of the old wolf place. If you go that fast, you won't live to regret it, she warned him. But he grinned again, showing a tongue as long as a necktie. That's an old wolf's tale, he said, and went on his reckless way. He bought a 1959 Blitzen Bearcat, a combination motor car and airplane with skyrocket getaway, cyclone speed drive, cannonball takeoff, blind doll headlights, magical retractable monowings, and lightning push-button transformationizer. How fast can this crate go without burning up? He asked the Blitzen Bearcat salesman. I don't know, said the salesman, but I have a feeling you'll find out. The wealthy young wolf smashed all the ground records and air records with a lot of other things in his trip around the world, which took him only 78.5 minutes from the time he knocked down the Washington Monument on his takeoff to the time he landed where it had stood in the crowd that welcomed him home, consisting of about 11 creatures, for all the others were hiding under beds. There was a speed-crazy young wolfess with built-in instantaneous pickup ability, and in no time at all the wolf and his newfound mate were setting records for driving upside down and backward, blindfolded, handcuffed, and cockeyed, doubled and redoubled. One day, they decided to see if they could turn it to Central Park from 5th Avenue while traveling at a rate of 175 miles an hour, watching television and holding hands. There was a tremendous shattering, crashing, splitting, roaring, blazing, cracking, and smashing, and ending in a fiery display of wheels, stars, cornices, roofs, treetops, glass, steel, and people. And it seemed to those spectators who do not die of seizures as they watched the great red portals opened in the sky, swinging inward on mighty hinges, revealing an endless nowhere, and then closed behind the flying and flaming wolves with a clinking to the end of all clinking, as if those gates, which we have assured shall not prevail, had in fact prevailed. Moral: for most of us, an end up there is no knowing, but the bell-bent get where they are going. That will be it for tonight. Sleep well.